Was Jacob wrestling with the God, the demon, or with his better self?
And I think that's kind of pertinent to what we've been talking about. I mean, are we all wrestling with our better self? Choose the angel and not the demon. Because they're both working on us.
Can we play a little game? In the Bible, that being is eventually called Peniel, which could be my face is God. Or it could be I turned to God. From the same root, with meaning an entirely different meaning, that most rabbis would tell you that this may well have been symbolic of, let's hear that word, symbolic, of an internal conflict within Jacob, and that this may have been the turning point where he turned from being prideful, dishonest, deceitful, thieving, everything we love in life, to being a good person and taking his place amongst the patriarchs of the Bible.
Two things. One, to go back, Jeremy, to yours. I think this is right. In classic Christian thought about angels and demons are very much interested in leaning on you in your day-to-day behavior and thought world and so on. The angels are not much engaged in that. The angels are busy praising God. And sometimes God gives them a task to come down and say, Jeremy, go to Wisconsin or something, right? So the angels aren't leaning on you in terms of your daily behavior. It would be God's Holy Spirit that is weighing on you in terms of doing good and behavior. What you're saying is, I'll just put my cards on the table. I get uncomfortable. I'm not uncomfortable with you or anybody else thinking it, but in myself, I get uncomfortable when I say, well, to say wrestling with angel or demon, really, you're just wrestling with yourself. I'm uncomfortable with that. Because, I mean, I'll lay my cards on the table. I very much believe in people are always stunned when I say this. They're like, he's got a PhD from Duke. He seems like a smart guy. I believe in all this. I believe there are angels, and I believe that there are demons. I don't believe they're little red guys flying around, but there are personal, inimical forces that are laboring to undo us. This is my experience of life, and it's the experience of many people that I know. They may say, I'm wrestling with myself, but for me, I think I gotta put it, that either makes me feel lonely or it puts too much pressure on me, if you know what I'm saying. That means like, it's all up to me to get it figured out. I've got to wrestle with myself. I believe there's a spiritual realm way beyond me, one that is sucking me into its vortex, but also there's power and support there to be of help to me. And one, that fits the way I experience reality better. And I think in terms of Christian theology, it's more sound. In Christian theology, we never want to leave you on your own. It's up to you to get it right or to get it wrong. We never want to do that. There's always a dependence upon this other realm. And that's both challenge, but primarily it's a comfort. Your hand's been up a bunch of times.
Could we accept the idea that the demon could take such possession of an individual that a person can be deemed as being possessed? And if that is accepted, is there such a thing as a Dybbuk and exorcism? And that is my question.
Somebody on my Facebook page asked, what do Jews believe about exorcism? I had no idea. So we can ask now.
Would you like me to teach you how to do it?
Yes. I wish I knew.
All kidding aside, I have performed 2 exorcisms in my life, both of homes. Didn't want to do it. Got into the first one because a neighboring rabbi, a good friend of mine, Jonathan Waxman, was asked by a Catholic friend of his if he could exorcise the demons from his house. And Jonathan said, what are you talking about? And he tells the story that windows keep breaking, they keep replacing them, the windows keep breaking. Blah, blah, blah. And he says, I won't do it, but my friend Murray Ezring will. So I went over to the house, and I asked what was going on. They told me, they showed me the windows. I touched the windows, ran my hand over it. Doesn't feel like God's in this house. That's a cold window. Tell you what we're going to do. And we put mezuzot on the doorways of the house. The mezuzot are the symbols containing selections from the Torah, the Bible, on the doorposts of our homes. I put one on every exterior door of this house, and you're not going to believe this. The windows never broke again, at least for the next 11 years that I know of. I don't know what happened after that. The people moved out of the house. Okay, but I will tell you there is an exorcism ritual in the Talmud. So there is a feeling that spirits can go into people. When Harvey asked about a Dybbuk is an unhappy spirit who has not returned to God, who is waiting, lurking in the cemetery for a pregnant woman to walk by, or a very young child, so that they can wrestle with the soul of the fetus or this young infant and take possession of them. It's folk wisdom, it's wonderful horror stories, no different than the werewolf stories and all of that we've got. By the way, if you ever hear someone say they're an arpad or an aluk, run the other way. They're vampires, they're werewolves, they're shapeshifters, and if you believe in them, then I will grant you the belief in the Dybbuk. But I do believe in ghosts. I do believe that there are times when human spirits don't return quickly to God because they have a debt to pay to God, to repentance to do. And although you're not going to believe me, I have seen a ghost, verified in public twice. Once, the last time was in Charleston, beautiful city. We were taking a ghost tour. And my daughter calls me from Detroit, telling me, Daddy, why didn't you call? I just finished my concert. You were supposed to call and see how I did. I said, oh, Aviva, I'm so sorry. I forgot. We're in Charleston. It's cold. We're on a ghost tour. It's very interesting. And she took her a day and a half to forgive me. I come back to my wife. There were only 4 people on our ghost tour because it was so cold. And the guide is saying, unfortunately, we can't get into the cemetery. But if we were, we'd have to be careful at night because there's a ghost here. I said, what do you mean we can't get into the cemetery? There's a woman standing right there behind the tree. And I described this woman to him. And he said, are you sure? I said, yeah, she's right there. Don't you? And no one else saw this woman. And he flips through the book and shows me a picture. I said, well, that's probably her. It was a hand-drawn picture. I said, looks pretty close. I said, but it's ruby red lipstick, white dress, long dark hair. Described her to a T. He said, that's the ghost. I said, I don't believe you. This is a human being. And we go to the other gate to the cemetery. We walk around. We get to this other gate. And there she is walking right down the center walk towards us. And I turned to my wife, the guide, the other person. I said, don't you see this woman? And no one else saw her. And I turned my back. I said, I don't believe you guys. You're pulling my leg. This is a joke. You set it up. Well, my daughter made me feel like a louse, and now you guys are making me out to be a fool. And then it happened. I felt like an icicle was stuck down the back of my shirt. And those of you who know my wife can ask her, the hair on the back of my head stood straight out. And when I turned around, this woman was walking the other way. And by the time she got to the middle of the cemetery, she had disappeared. And so, could a Dybbuk exist? Maybe. Do ghosts exist? I think probably.
He's just got way better stories than I do. God. It's like,
You don't spend enough time in a cemetery at night.
Hanukkah. It's like Hanukkah. We can't keep up with you guys. It's just bad.
You know, the courts in the state of New York confirm the existence of ghosts. And if you want, I can tell you a story. This is an actual case in the state of New York. There was a home in Westchester that the locals considered as being inhabited by ghosts. That was the story. And this buyer, who did not know of the supposed story for this home, entered into a contract to purchase the home. Now, this is an actual case in the state of New York. Once the buyer found out about this story about the ghosts, the buyer sought to break the contract. The courts eventually agreed by saying that the contract said that the house would be vacant and uninhabited. And because they considered the existence of the ghost, that the house was in fact inhabited, and they allowed the woman to break the contract. This case was confirmed by one of the appellate divisions, the second highest court of the state.
Okay, but these are Yankees, not Southerners you're talking about.
If y'all believe it.
Well, you know, what else can you ask? You've got a Jewish court that admitted demons exist and had rights to a home, and a court in New York State. I mean,
All right, I'm going to call, because we're trying to lose some people, 2 hands. We're going to take these 2, and then and then we'll be done. Rose.
I don't mean to take things from a kind of levity to something kind of tragic, but I really need to ask, mainly because you were both there, and I just need to feel I need to ask it. But how, as men of God, would you talk to somebody who has suffered, absolutely an unexplainable, a kind of a tragedy, a life-changing tragedy, and how do you talk to somebody who feels totally victimized, totally wiped out, their life 1 minute normal, the next minute is basically ruined? How do you, and I think that this person feels that they have been totally victimized, whether they believe in demons or evil. Their life is wiped out, and yet they're alive, but they have no life. How do you?
Okay, not every Christian theologian would agree with me, but sometimes others, want to be wrong. I'm kidding. I wrote a book on the will of God. One of the things that I say in there is that there actually there's no such thing as an unexplained tragedy. There's an explanation for everything that happens. We may not, let me just finish. We may not understand it at the moment, but there is some explanation. There aren't mystifying deaths for no reason. There's something we don't know about medicine. It's like I said Sunday about the cemetery where I saw the 3 children who had died of diphtheria. Back then, they didn't know what diphtheria was. They thought, God took these children. They didn't know. Well, we know what diphtheria is now. We know the progress of that disease. We can prevent diphtheria. Nobody dies of diphtheria and so on. So there are no unexplained tragedies. Sometimes there are car accidents, and people say, why? Well, in the heat of the moment, you don't say, well, the reason why. Because when someone has lost someone they love and they say, why, it's not an intellectual question. That's a scream from the heart. It's an ache that it couldn't bear an answer if there was an answer at that moment. So pastorally, in that moment, we just love. We just listen. We sit in the dark together. But I believe eventually it's important for people to understand the reasons for why a tragedy happened. Otherwise, you're kind of left with this, the world's too scary, the world's meaningless, God took this person from me that I loved and needed so much. So to understand logically why something happened can actually be a big step toward healing. So I don't like to allow that that there's such a thing as unexplained tragedies. I've never seen one that I couldn't come up with a pretty good explanation for why it had happened. That doesn't mean it makes it okay or that emotionally it's understandable.